Record.
We're recording now. We are not live. We are recording, and
Transparency.
yeah. So this show, I think I'm going to try to set it to air at midnight tonight. So it will be the date that it's on, that it's scheduled for the 21st of February, and I'm back with the whole ego thing, and I'm going to see how well I can control my ego throughout the day and throughout the night, particularly throughout the day on social media. And I think tomorrow, I'm going to try not to engage with people I disagree with and engage with people I agree with or I see commonality with, and people I can have a conversation with and not have a conversation at. And because a lot of times I'm saying things to people that are more argumentative, and it's more talking at each other instead of to each other. So that's what I'm going to try to do.
That sure makes more sense. Let me know when you're ready to get into this idea of ego, because I think I have thought about it a little more, and I do have a little kind of a philosophy on how I look at ego.
Well, I'm reading here: build a man's ego and you'll win his favor. Crush a man's ego and you'll receive much grief from him. So give me you want to give me your view on ego, Joe?
So yeah, I'm just kind of, putting my head together on this, but it's how I viewed it. And so we have three components that I think we mentioned in the last episode: our mind, our body, and our spirit. And some people put each of these into stratas, where the super ego and the id and the ego all work together. I'm trying to make this so it's not confusing, because it is a confusing idea. I just happen to have, worked in this field for a while and studied this and gave it a lot of thought. And what makes the most sense to me is that our spirit, which is our breath, is kind of like our id, or our identification. Our mind would be more of the super ego, and that can kind of, be also said to relate to, your connection to God or spirituality. And then body would be the ego. So my theory really is that the ego is just kind of like a costume that we wear, while the id and the super ego kind of produce what the ego will present to everyone else. So that's why I say, it's all a matter of, the person and how they handle ego. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's inherited that they abuse their ego, and whatever kind of traits come along with that are very apparent. But if you're trying to let the three of these concepts, and each of them have very in-depth kind of background, and it's kind of hard to get into unless, we do a show where we read and really pick apart each of these one by one. I'd like to do that, do a show on the id, a show on ego, and a show on super ego, and really get into, how and why I came to these conclusions, and that our ego is just a costume. And how fancy do you want to dress to the ball? So there you go.
You know, I forget it. I forget who said it, but someone once said, "I would rather be hated for who I really am than loved for who I'm not."
I'm sorry.
And
I'm sorry. You said you read it. Like, did you see who quoted that?
I can't remember who quoted it, but yeah, it was someone who said, and I forget who said it, but he said, "I would rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not."
I saw that today, and it was or yesterday, and it was somebody said it was a quote from Kurt Cobain, and I'm like, no way, it can't be. I've heard it too many other times, so I'll have to do some research and get the etymology.
You know what? It just goes to show you how bad my memory is. That I remember we just talked about that, and you said that, and I'm repeating that.
Oh yeah, no,
So
that's fine. Yeah, I get that, but I think that's it is interesting. It did remind me to right, because it's kind of hard to associate a quote like that to Kurt Cobain, who I think is a complete fraud on the masses.
well, I think people put more into him than he actually was, and then they want to try to emulate people like that, their image of who they are instead of who they really are, because they could never live up. You can never live up. I don't think you can ever live up to a false image. And like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just a man, you're just a man, and we're both trying to survive. And sometimes people are surviving. I mean, their ego is helping them survive, and their ego is will do things like put you down to make them feel better, and will try to hurt you so it makes them feel good and feel superior. And sometimes you have to learn to walk away and say, this is just their ego working through. And I think letting go of your ego, for me, I think is kind of a maturing experience. It's like, you know what, there are people that aren't going to think you're enlightened or intelligent or that smart. There are people out there that are going to think you're ignorant and foolish, and they're not going to agree with you. And you just have to let that go. And that has been a problem. Like on social media, I always want to. I always want to engage with people who I disagree with, and that's kind of a waste of time to a large extent, because if they don't want to engage with me, why even talk to them? And I have to remind myself of that, and it is hard because I have an ego. I have an ego. I think I can change people's opinion with what I believe is my insight, but that's not always a possibility. And I'm working on that. And that's at least what I want to work at as far as like social media is concerned. We're all struggling, and I think we all, like, our opinions all have an ego behind them. Whether you're left or whether you're right, whether you're center, whether you're whether you transcend all of that, there's ego behind it. I mean, I know when I'm hungry. I know when I'm full for the most part. I know when I'm thirsty. I know when I'm lustful. The other, The other stuff, some of it's a guessing game, or at least much of the rest is a guessing game for me. And I certainly could be wrong. And my ignorance is astounding.
I wouldn't say that. Certainly, you can't rely on what's in the past to determine how you feel potentially about these in the present. Looking at just the ideas of superego versus ego is it's so important when you realize that the superego plays the critical moralizing kind of role, and when you learn, when I learned that, not you, but when I learned that, I was like, oh, because I thought the ego was just kind of doing all of that already. I thought that was what the ego did basically, along with everything else it does. But I learned that if you let your ego get out of control, then it can take your super ego's critical thinking or moral values, and it can twist those moral values. So there's a bending. So if they're not all working together, the chair will fall on this three-legged chair.
It's an interesting concept, and I think we can hit that on the head for another day. I right now want to kind of keep my ego in check and say that I'm just a man and I do not know everything. And there are times when I act like I know a subject, and if people ask enough questions, I will show my ignorance on things. And sometimes I actually think that I'm wiser than I actually am. And yeah, and I just want to just be that clear, as clear and as thoughtful as I can be. And with that being said, I think I will end this broadcast. Joe, is there anything to say before I end this?
Nope, that's about it. I think we covered that. We'll definitely get deeper into. I'd like to at least get in. I like to hear your kind of understanding of it. It's not a matter of, you shouldn't look at it as a matter of ignorance, but rather just maybe a matter of inexperience. Because even when I was so-called or supposedly educated in it, it took me probably 15 years of application and true, real kind of like to get a real true kind of grasp, to at least to be able to talk about it and explain it. I always had kind of a working knowledge of it, but now it's more esoteric and it's also scientific, and it's pretty interesting to to look at.
And with that being said, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, visit our Rumble page because, again, and our Rumble page is in the description section of our show. And we're on Twitter, and we're also on I forget the other name, but yeah. So we're on a few social media sites. We plan to get on more, and just find more people to converse and have this wonderful conversation with people and human beings, and hopefully we can we can grow and grow both mentally and physically healthy. Anyway, again, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. and visit our website at transparencyandmerit.com. Thank you for listening.